I complimented the alien captain. She froze, blushed, then took me prisoner. Alden Cross had always imagined that first contact with an alien civilization would be a grand affair. Bright lights, monumental ships, dignified speeches, maybe even some formal handshake or ceremonial exchange. What he had not expected was how quiet it would feel as he stepped onto the bridge of the Zirin flagship. The air hummed softly, vibrating in tune with the ship itself, and the walls glowed with colors that seemed alive, shifting subtly as he moved. He had been sent as an envoy from Earth, a representative of humanity's fledgling space coalition. The Zirins were a powerful species, well known across several sectors for their technological mastery and rigid social hierarchy. The task was clear: negotiate trade, establish diplomacy, and ensure that humanity earned a place at the interstellar table. What Alden had not expected was the alien captain herself, standing at the helm with a presence so commanding that it nearly stole his breath away. Captain Sira was unlike any being Alden had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly, iridescent, changing hues slightly with her emotions. Her eyes, large and luminous, seemed to pierce through the deck beneath him and into his very thoughts. She stood tall, elegant, every movement deliberate, every gesture controlled. Alden had studied Zirin culture for months, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer intensity of her presence. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice smooth, yet carrying an edge of authority that left no doubt about who was in command. Alden swallowed, forcing a smile. "Captain Sira, it's an honor to be aboard your ship. Your flagship, it's remarkable. The design, the systems, it's unlike anything humans have built." The words slipped out before he could think, simple human courtesy, a compliment meant to ease the tension. Sira froze. Her hand, which had been poised mid-gesture, hovered in the air as if time itself had stopped. The air between them seemed to thicken, the hum of the ship growing louder in Alden's ears. He had expected perhaps a polite nod, maybe a faint acknowledgement, but not this. Not the sudden, unmistakable blush that colored her cheeks, changing the iridescent shimmer of her skin to a warmer, almost human tone. The crew around them exchanged subtle glances. Alden noticed the careful, almost reverent distance they kept from their captain. Their expressions suggested that this reaction was unusual. Curiosity mixed with caution, like observers witnessing something profoundly personal and entirely unplanned. Alden's voice faltered. He tried to backtrack. I meant no offense, just admiration for your craft." Sira's eyes, previously sharp and unreadable, softened slightly, though she did not speak immediately. Then, in a tone that was calm but firm, she said, "You will remain aboard as my guest." Alden blinked, trying to process the sentence. "Guest?" he asked, uncertain if he had heard correctly. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. "Your words have created a bond. It is not customary for Zirins to accept compliments lightly. There are obligations that follow." Obligations. Alden had studied the Zirins, knew their culture, their codes of honor, but this was new. He was not exactly a prisoner, not in the sense of confinement or threat, yet he could not leave either. It was a position of strange safety and strange constraint. He had walked onto the flagship as a diplomat, but now, in a single, simple statement, he had altered his fate. The corridors he was escorted through were vast and alien, architecture flowing in curves and angles that defied human engineering. The walls pulsed softly, alive with bioluminescent veins that traced patterns like veins in a living organism. Every step Alden took was a reminder that he was far from home, far from the comfortable familiarity of Earth, yet completely safe in a way that was almost disorienting. Sira's crew, though initially cautious, treated him with respect. No one made a move that could be interpreted as hostile, and Alden began to notice subtle gestures, small nods, attentive eyes, a careful consideration of his presence. That suggested they were curious, but also aware of the obligations his compliment had triggered. "You may observe, but you will not interfere," Sira said as they reached his quarters. The room was modest by Zirin standards, but comfortable. It shimmered with soft light and contained equipment that Alden recognized only partially, along with displays showing star charts, fleet movements, and other information far beyond human technology. "Thank you," Alden said cautiously. "I understand." Sira inclined her head slightly. "You are curious, human. That is expected. You will find much that is unfamiliar here. Observe, learn, and remember that words carry weight, sometimes more than actions." Alden nodded, feeling the weight of her gaze even as she left the room. He realized that the compliment he had given, a simple human gesture, had placed him in a delicate position. In Ziran culture, words were powerful, personal, binding. His casual admiration had created an obligation, a connection he had not anticipated. Sitting on the edge of the smooth, curved bed, Alden ran a hand over his face. He was technically a prisoner, yet completely free to move within the ship, to watch, to learn, to speak only when permitted. He felt a strange combination of fear, curiosity, and excitement. For the first time, he understood that diplomacy was not merely about treaties and negotiations. It was about understanding the unspoken, the subtle, the invisible threads that connected beings across cultures and species. The first few hours passed slowly. Alden wandered the corridors under supervision, observing the crew at work. Ziran technology was unlike anything he had seen. Control panels that responded to thought, drones that moved almost organically, holographic displays that seemed to float in midair. He marveled at the efficiency, the precision, and yet he could not ignore the subtle expressions of the crew, who watched him as carefully as he watched them. When he finally encountered Sira again, it was in the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the hull, a tapestry of light that made Earth feel impossibly small. She stood silently, her gaze fixed on the cosmos, yet Alden felt as though she could see everything inside him. "You observe our world," she said softly. "What do you see?" Alden hesitated. "I see complexity, beauty, and a kind of order humans can barely comprehend. Your people are disciplined, your technology incredible. I can see why the galaxy respects the Zirans." Sira's blush returned, though more subtle this time. "You speak freely, human." "That is unusual. Most are cautious, careful not to offend." "I am learning," Alden admitted, "and I want to understand." For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the only sound the hum of the ship and the distant pulse of stars. Alden realized that despite the formal title of prisoner, he was not treated as one. He had freedom to observe, to ask questions, to interact, though always within the bounds of Sira's strict control. As the hours turned into evening, Alden was invited to a small chamber where the crew conducted simulations and strategic planning. He watched from a distance, impressed by the precision and coordination. Yet he noticed something the Zirans did not: small moments of hesitation, tiny openings in their otherwise perfect formation. He could see how human adaptability, quick thinking, improvisation might be valuable here. He also noticed Sira, observing him now not with suspicion but with curiosity. She asked questions about humanity, about their culture, their decisions, their values. Each question seemed to deepen the connection, and Alden could sense the subtle warmth behind her otherwise composed exterior. Her blushes, slight though they were, seemed to signal more than simple embarrassment. They hinted at recognition, understanding, and perhaps something personal that went beyond protocol. By the time the first cycle of the ship's day ended, Alden understood that he was in a unique position. He was a human among aliens, a representative of his species, and yet also something else: a link, a bridge, someone whose presence could have unforeseen consequences. His compliment, meant as a simple gesture of respect, had created a bond that could shape events far beyond his imagination. That night, as he lay in his quarters watching the stars, Alden reflected on the strange twist of fate. He had arrived expecting negotiation, expecting diplomacy, expecting careful words and treaties. Instead, he had found himself in a position of delicate captivity, caught in the currents of alien culture, observing a captain whose strength was matched only by the subtle humanity she revealed in fleeting moments. He realized that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with beings who were both wondrous and dangerous. And in this moment aboard the Ziran flagship, Alden understood something fundamental. Humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, its armies, or even its cleverness. It was its ability to connect, to understand, and to inspire, even across the unimaginable distance between stars and species. And somewhere deep in the heart of the ship, Captain Sira considered him with the same cautious curiosity, wondering what a human might truly bring to her universe. The next morning, Alden awoke to the gentle hum of the Ziran flagship. The corridors were bathed in soft light, the walls pulsing faintly, as if the ship itself were breathing. He stretched and ran a hand over the smooth surface of his quarters, feeling the quiet weight of being a guest and prisoner at the same time. He knew he could not leave the ship, yet there was no visible barrier or chain. This was a subtle confinement, defined by culture and honor rather than force. He stepped into the corridor, careful to notice every detail. The crew moved with efficiency, their movements flowing like water through the organic architecture. They glanced at him occasionally, respectful but cautious, as if unsure how to respond to a human who had caused the captain to blush. Alden had been warned that his simple compliment carried weight, but he had not expected the ripple it created through the entire crew. A soft chime alerted him to an incoming message. It was from Sira. "Come to the observation deck." The message carried no threat, only a sense of importance. Alden's heart beat faster. He wondered what she would say, if she would speak formally or casually. And he wondered if the blush he had seen the day before had faded or lingered in her thoughts. When he arrived, Sira was already there, standing near the wide viewport, her eyes fixed on the stars. She did not turn immediately, her posture tense and controlled. Alden approached slowly, giving her space, feeling again the magnetic presence that had startled him the first time. "You observe," she said finally, not looking at him. "What do you see?" Alden paused. He could speak honestly. "I see a disciplined crew, a ship that is alive in its own way, and a captain who commands respect effortlessly. Your people trust you even without knowing me. That is remarkable." Sira turned slightly enough to meet his gaze. Her blush was faint but noticeable, the warm hue against her iridescent skin. "You speak freely. Humans are different from most species. Your words are blunt yet honest. That is unexpected." "I speak what I feel," Alden admitted. "I admire what I see." "I did not intend to cause offense." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable, then nodded once. "Understanding requires observation. You will remain aboard and you will learn." Alden realized this was a subtle form of permission. He could move, ask questions, and observe, but always within the bounds of Ziran protocol. The weight of his words yesterday had placed him in a strange position of respect and obligation. He was both limited and free, a paradox that made him uneasy but intrigued. As the hours passed, Alden was shown more of the ship. The corridors opened into vast chambers where the crew trained and simulated complex scenarios. Holographic maps displayed fleets in motion, star systems shifting in real time, showing tactical maneuvers that Alden could barely follow. Yet even in this complexity, he noticed the Zirans' rigidity, each action planned, each response calculated. It was impressive, but it left little room for improvisation. He thought about Earth's history, about how humans adapted in unpredictable situations, often succeeding where strategy alone failed. A thought came to him, almost instinctively. These beings were powerful, yes, but they might underestimate the value of spontaneity and creativity. During one of his walks through the training chamber, a junior officer approached him cautiously. "Captain Sira says you may observe but must not interfere." "I understand," Alden said, "but may I ask questions?" The officer considered him, then nodded. "Yes, but only if Captain Sira allows it." Alden followed the officer to a secondary observation room, watching drills and training exercises. He saw the crew move in perfect coordination, yet tiny moments of hesitation appeared, split seconds where a different tactic might have improved efficiency. He made a mental note. Perhaps later, if the captain allowed, he could offer suggestions. As the day wore on, Alden's thoughts often returned to Sira. He wondered if her blush had been more than embarrassment. In humans, such reactions often indicated admiration or curiosity. Could aliens feel the same? Could a Ziran captain whose species valued control above all experience a human-like response to a compliment? Alden did not know, and the uncertainty both unnerved and fascinated him. Eventually, Sira invited him to a quiet chamber adjacent to the observation deck. It was simple compared to the rest of the ship, a place for reflection and discussion. She gestured for him to sit. "You ask questions," she said. "I will answer within reason." "Thank you, Captain," Alden said. He settled into the seat, trying to appear calm, though his mind raced. "You speak of humans' creativity and adaptability," Sira continued. "Tell me more. How does your species respond to situations beyond control?" Alden leaned forward. "We improvise, we take risks when necessary. We learn from failure and we adapt quickly. That is why humans have survived on Earth despite disasters, predators, and conflicts. We don't always follow rules, but we find solutions." Sira's eyes seemed to study him, analyzing the very core of his words. That is curious. Rigidity ensures survival in most situations. Flexibility can be dangerous, yet you claim it is your strength? Yes, Alden said. Because it allows us to overcome obstacles that pure discipline cannot. Sometimes unpredictability is an advantage. Sira nodded slowly. Interesting. Perhaps humans are not entirely inferior to the Zirans, as many believe. Alden felt a small thrill. The captain, who had seemed untouchable, was acknowledging humanity's potential. It was subtle, but it mattered. Her eyes flickered briefly to him, and he noticed that faint warmth again, the blush that came with curiosity, or perhaps something more personal. For the next few hours, Alden explored the ship further under careful observation. He saw the living quarters of the crew, their routines, their rituals. Ziran culture was strict, hierarchical, and disciplined, yet he noticed personal touches, small decorations, symbols, reminders of individuality within the collective. It fascinated him. Humans valued individuality too, though in different ways, and he began to understand that despite the differences, there were threads of similarity. By the time the first Ziran cycle ended, Alden had made a small breakthrough. He understood that his words yesterday had created a delicate bridge. Sira watched him in a new way, and the crew treated him with cautious respect. He was no longer just a human visitor. He was a participant in a subtle cultural exchange, one that might influence diplomacy and relationships far beyond this single ship. The evening brought a quiet moment on the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the hull, and Alden felt a strange calmness. Sira joined him, her posture relaxed yet still commanding. They stood side by side, looking out into the galaxy. "You have observed much today," she said. "What is your impression of the Zirans?" "They are disciplined, skilled, and powerful," Alden said honestly. "But there is room for adaptation, for thinking differently, and there is beauty in the way your species functions together, in the way you trust one another." Sira's expression softened. She turned to him fully, her iridescent skin glowing faintly. "You speak with honesty and respect. That is rare." "I only speak what I feel," Alden replied, "and I want to understand." For a long moment, neither spoke. Alden realized that the position he held, as a guest and prisoner, was teaching him more than he had anticipated. He was learning about Ziran culture, strategy, and behavior, yes, but he was also learning about connection, trust, and the unexpected power of a simple compliment. As the lights dimmed to signal the end of the cycle, Alden retired to his quarters. He reviewed what he had learned, taking mental notes on crew behavior, ship systems, and the subtle ways Zirans communicated emotion. And always, in the back of his mind, lingered the memory of Sira's blush, the way it had revealed a layer of her personality that few outsiders ever saw. He realized that diplomacy was not only about treaties or trade. It was about understanding, observation, and the ability to connect across unimaginable differences. And somehow, in his first hours aboard the Ziran flagship, he had done exactly that. As he lay down, Alden thought of the days ahead. He knew that challenges would come, tests of intelligence, courage, and diplomacy. But he also knew that he had earned a small but significant measure of respect. He was not merely a visitor. He was a participant in something larger than himself, a link between two species who might one day find common ground among the stars. And somewhere deep within the ship, Captain Sira considered him in the same way. She reflected on her own reactions, the unexpected warmth he had stirred in her, and the curiosity that had begun to grow. She understood that the human before her was not ordinary, that his presence could change perceptions, and that his simple words had already begun to shape the dynamic aboard her ship. The galaxy beyond the viewport stretched endlessly, full of possibilities and dangers alike. Alden knew that the days ahead would be filled with challenge and learning, but he also knew one simple truth. A single compliment, given honestly, had opened a door, one that could lead humanity into the wider universe in ways he could scarcely imagine. And with that thought, he closed his eyes, ready for whatever awaited him next. The next Ziran cycle began with a low hum of activity that seemed to pulse through the entire ship. Alden walked through the corridors, observing the crew as they moved with an almost hypnotic precision. Every motion was deliberate, every response perfectly timed. The Zirans valued discipline above all, and it showed. He had studied their culture from Earth, but seeing it in practice was something else entirely. He noticed subtle glances from the crew, the way they whispered among themselves before looking his way, the quick, fleeting evaluations of his presence. Alden understood now that he was not simply a visitor. He was a human whose words had caused ripples far beyond what he had imagined. His compliment to Captain Sira had created a bond that went deeper than protocol, and the crew was aware of it. He had become a subject of curiosity and perhaps even respect. A soft chime signaled a message from Sira. "Meet me in the strategy chamber. Observation is no longer enough. You will participate." Alden's pulse quickened. Participation meant involvement, and involvement carried risk. He walked quickly, carefully through the bioluminescent corridors that seemed alive, feeling the eyes of the crew upon him. Some were cautious, others curious, and a few seemed almost amused. Alden wondered if they understood the small victories that humanity could achieve with subtlety and intelligence. When he arrived, Sira was already there, standing before a massive holographic display of star systems, fleet positions, and simulations of enemy maneuvers. Her posture was perfect, commanding, yet her eyes softened slightly when she looked at him. The faint glow of her blush lingered, though it had faded from the intensity of the first day. "You will advise," she said simply. "Your species approaches situations differently. Observe the scenario, then tell me what you would do." Alden studied the display carefully. The Xiran fleet was simulated in a controlled environment, moving with perfect coordination, but he noticed tiny gaps, moments where human unpredictability could offer advantage. "There's a pattern," he said, pointing at the holographic map. "Your ships follow strict formations, which is excellent for defense, but if the enemy anticipates it, you might be vulnerable to a sudden maneuver or feint." Sira's eyes narrowed, considering his words. "Explain." "Be precise." He described a strategy using rapid, unexpected movements, taking advantage of human unpredictability. He explained how a smaller, agile force could create openings in the opponent's formation. He spoke carefully, aware that the Xirans valued logic and precision above all. For a long moment, Sira was silent. Then she nodded slowly. "We will test your suggestion." The simulation began. Alden watched as the Xiran ships executed his proposed maneuvers. At first, some ships faltered, caught between tradition and improvisation. Then, as the crew adapted, the strategy worked flawlessly. The holographic enemy fleet was outmaneuvered, unable to respond to the unorthodox tactics. Alden felt a surge of satisfaction. Not only had he contributed, but he had shown the value of human creativity in a culture that rarely allowed for it. Sira turned to him, a faint smile on her lips, unusual and fleeting. "Your input was effective. It seems humans have value beyond what is expected." Alden smiled cautiously. "I think humans can adapt quickly. Sometimes thinking differently is the only way to survive." Her gaze lingered on him longer than necessary. Alden noticed it, the subtle way her eyes softened, the hint of warmth that seemed to pulse beneath her calm exterior. He had seen it before, the blush, but now it was deeper, more personal, suggesting a growing respect or curiosity. For the rest of the cycle, Alden observed the crew during training sessions. He saw their dedication, their precision, and their unwavering loyalty to Sira. He also noticed moments of vulnerability, tiny gaps in their perfect coordination, moments when creativity could tip the scales. He made mental notes, understanding that his role was not just to observe, but to learn the patterns of a species unlike any other. Later, Sira invited him to join her for a walk through the ship. The corridors were quieter now, the crew attending to routine tasks. The walls pulsed gently, lighting their path with soft glows. Alden followed, careful to match her pace, aware of the subtle tension between them. "You observe more than you participate," Sira said after a moment. "Do you understand why?" Alden thought carefully. "Because observation allows me to learn without interfering. I can see what works and what doesn't before offering advice. And I think it also shows respect for your culture." She studied him silently, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "Yes, observation is important, but participation is necessary to prove understanding." They reached the observation deck again, where stars stretched endlessly beyond the hull. Alden leaned on the railing, marveling at the vastness of space. Sira stood beside him, her posture rigid yet natural. For a moment they simply watched the stars together, the hum of the ship filling the silence. "Do humans often adapt so quickly?" she asked softly. "Sometimes," Alden replied. We survive by finding solutions in moments of crisis. We learn from mistakes, from failure, and from each other. It is how we endure. Sira's gaze lingered on him. You speak of endurance as if it is an art. Perhaps your species has strengths we do not understand. I think every species has its own strengths, Alden said. But humans, we rely on connection, on understanding each other, on trust. That is how we achieve the impossible. Her eyes softened further, the faint warmth of her blush returning. Trust, that is rare in the galaxy. You humans may be more dangerous than we thought. Alden laughed lightly, a human sound that seemed oddly familiar in the sterile environment of the ship. Or maybe we're just adaptable, and sometimes compliments have consequences. Sira's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. She did not respond verbally, but Alden understood the acknowledgement. He had not only contributed to their tactical simulations, but had begun to influence the perception of humans in the eyes of the Ziran captain. Over the next hours, Alden was invited to observe more scenarios, some simulations of trade negotiations, others of fleet coordination. Each time, he noticed the crew's precision and skill, but he also began to see the moments where human creativity could be applied. He suggested minor adjustments, ways to anticipate opponent behavior, and small improvements in coordination. Each suggestion was met with careful consideration, and each success subtly reinforced the bond between him and Sira. At one point, a young officer approached him. Captain Sira asks if you would like to join the next simulation. You may advise directly. Alden's heart raced. Participation meant risk, but also opportunity. He agreed, understanding that this was the moment where observation turned into influence. He would not only watch but contribute, demonstrating humanity's potential in ways that were visible to the crew and to Sira herself. The simulation began. Alden worked alongside the crew, offering suggestions and making adjustments in real time. He saw the Zirans struggle initially with deviations from their strict protocol, but gradually they adapted, incorporating his ideas seamlessly. The simulated enemy fleet faltered, unable to predict the unorthodox tactics. Alden realized that the blend of human creativity and Ziran discipline was more powerful than either alone. After the simulation ended, Sira approached him. Her expression was unreadable at first, then softened. Your contribution was valuable. You are not merely a visitor, human. You are a participant. Alden felt a surge of pride, tempered by awareness of the responsibility he now held. Thank you, Captain. I am honored to contribute. She studied him quietly, her eyes reflecting both the stars outside and something more personal. Alden felt the familiar warmth of her blush, subtle yet undeniable. It was a human-like sign of emotion in a species that valued control above all. He realized that their connection, begun by a simple compliment, was deepening in ways neither of them could have predicted. As the cycle ended, Alden retired to his quarters, reflecting on the day's events. He had observed, advised, and participated. He had seen Ziran discipline, skill, and loyalty, but also moments where human ingenuity could make a difference. And he had seen Sira, her curiosity, her subtle warmth, her recognition of his humanity. He understood now that this was more than diplomacy. It was a lesson in connection, trust, and understanding across species. His compliment had created a bridge, and every interaction, every suggestion, every shared moment was reinforcing it. Humanity had earned a foothold aboard the Ziran flagship, not through force, but through observation, respect, and insight. And somewhere deep within the ship, Captain Sira considered him with the same mixture of curiosity and caution. She reflected on her own reactions, the unexpected respect and fascination she felt toward this human who had dared to speak freely, to observe carefully, and to contribute meaningfully. She understood that Alden's presence could change not only her perception of humans, but perhaps the future of interstellar relations itself. Alden lay in his quarters that night, staring at the faint glow of Ziran lights. The galaxy beyond stretched endlessly, full of challenges and opportunities. And he knew that the days ahead would test not only his intelligence and diplomacy, but also his ability to connect, adapt, and influence. He smiled faintly, remembering the first day, the compliment, the blush. A simple human gesture had started something far greater than he could have imagined. A bridge between species, a recognition of humanity's worth, and perhaps the beginning of a story that would reach across the stars. And with that thought, he drifted into sleep, ready for whatever awaited him on the Zirin flagship. The Zirin flagship glided silently through the black expanse of space, stars stretching endlessly on every side. Alden walked along the corridors, observing the crew at work. Their movements were precise, efficient, and disciplined, yet today there was a tension in the air he had not noticed before. Subtle but unmistakable, it hummed through the ship like the low vibration of the engines. Something was coming, and Alden could feel it even before the alarms began. A sudden alert rang out, sharp and urgent. Holographic displays flared to life, showing multiple unidentified ships approaching from the edge of the system. They were sleek, angular, and moving with aggressive speed. Zirin's sensors identified them as the Voran Marauders, a faction known for raids and brutality. Alden felt a chill. These were not diplomats or traitors. These were raiders who would destroy anything in their path. Captain Sira appeared at the helm, her posture rigid, every movement precise. She issued commands calmly, her voice carrying authority that left no room for question. All defensive systems to ready. Crew, prepare for evasive maneuvers, shields to full power. Weapon systems, report status. Alden watched as the crew sprang into action, their coordination flawless. Yet, despite the efficiency, Alden noticed something. The Zirins followed strict patterns, reacting predictably. He realized immediately that a determined opponent could exploit this rigidity. Human intuition kicked in. He stepped forward, his voice steady but urgent. "Captain Sira, if I may, there is a pattern to their approach. They expect standard evasive maneuvers. We can use that against them. Let me suggest a diversion." Sira turned, her piercing eyes locking onto his. For a moment, the usual calm control faltered slightly. "Explain," she said. Alden pointed at the display. "We simulate a withdrawal on one flank. Let a small, agile squadron appear vulnerable. They will commit to the attack there. Meanwhile, the main fleet can strike from an unexpected angle. It will disrupt their formation and create openings for counterattack." Sira considered his words. Her hands hovered over controls, then slowly nodded. "Prepare the simulation. Execute at my signal." Alden felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the moment where human creativity and Zirin discipline could combine. He moved quickly, giving instructions in a calm, precise manner, ensuring that the crew understood the unorthodox tactics. There was a flicker of doubt in some of the officers, but Sira's presence reassured them. They executed the plan with precision, despite the deviation from their normal protocol. The first wave of Voran ships fell for the diversion. They surged toward the apparent weakness, leaving their flank exposed. Alden's heart pounded as he watched the counterattack unfold. The main fleet struck with perfect timing, slicing through the enemy formation before the raiders could recover. Alarms rang, flashes of light from shields and weapons illuminated the bridge, and Alden realized that his human insight had just saved countless Zirin lives. Sira's eyes narrowed as she observed the result. The usual controlled expression softened slightly, and for a fleeting moment her blush returned, subtle but undeniable. She spoke in a low, firm tone. "Your suggestion was effective. Humanity may have value beyond what I anticipated." Alden nodded, feeling a mix of relief and pride. "Thank you, Captain. I'm glad it worked." The crew, initially tense, now moved with renewed confidence. They adapted to the unconventional tactics with surprising speed, proving that flexibility, when guided correctly, could complement their discipline. Alden observed them closely, noting each reaction, each adjustment. The Zirins were exceptional, but they had not expected human intuition to make a difference in a real combat scenario. As the battle continued, Alden stayed at Sira's side, offering suggestions when needed. His heart raced with every maneuver, every strike, and every decision. He saw the importance of observation, but he also saw the power of action guided by understanding. Humanity, he realized, had a role to play even in the vast, alien expanse of space. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The Voran Marauders were gradually pushed back, unable to anticipate the combined tactics of humans and Zirins. Alden suggested a final move, sending a small squadron on a high-speed flanking run to disable the enemy's command ship. Sira approved. The maneuver succeeded brilliantly, the Marauder fleet scattering into the void, their attack neutralized. When the alarms finally ceased, the bridge was silent except for the low hum of the engines. Sira turned to Alden, her expression difficult to read but her eyes softer than usual. "You performed well," she said. You are more than a human visitor. You are part of this crew now in some measure. Alden's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and surprise. I only acted as I could. I observed, I analyzed, I hoped it would help. Her gaze lingered on him, subtle warmth in her expression. Observation is useful, but action proves worth. You have shown both. The crew began to settle, repairing minor damages and recalibrating systems. Alden moved among them, observing their methods, their care for one another, and their disciplined approach to recovery. He realized that this was a species that valued precision, loyalty, and responsibility, but that even in the face of strict hierarchy, human creativity could enhance their effectiveness. Later, Sira invited him to the observation deck. Stars stretched in every direction, and the aftermath of the battle was visible as distant flashes and debris. They stood silently, side by side, the silence heavy with unspoken understanding. Alden could feel her attention, the subtle recognition of his contributions, and the faint warmth of her blush lingered beneath the surface of her calm exterior. "You acted with courage," she said quietly. "You risked yourself not for glory but to assist. That is unusual." Alden smiled faintly. Humanity survives by helping each other, by observing, understanding, and acting when needed. I think the same applies to the Zirans in your way. Sira studied him. Perhaps there is merit in your perspective. Flexibility and adaptation, qualities not valued highly in Ziran culture, yet you demonstrate their power. For a moment, Alden saw something more personal in her eyes, curiosity, perhaps respect, a subtle acknowledgement of connection. He realized that their bond, begun by a simple compliment days ago, had deepened in ways neither of them had expected. The remainder of the cycle was filled with assessments and debriefings. Alden observed how the crew repaired their systems, recalibrated weapons, and adjusted tactics based on lessons learned. He noticed how Sira integrated his observations into her leadership style, consulting him when she encountered unusual situations or novel threats. Their interactions were professional but tinged with personal curiosity, a delicate balance between respect, obligation, and mutual understanding. In his quarters, Alden reflected on the day's events. The battle had tested him, but it had also proved humanity's value in a tangible way. He had witnessed Ziran discipline, skill, and loyalty firsthand, and he had contributed in a meaningful way, not by force but by insight. The compliment that had started this chain of events now seemed insignificant compared to the bridge it had built. That night, Alden found himself once again on the observation deck. Stars stretched endlessly, the void both beautiful and humbling. He thought of Earth, of the humans he represented, and of the opportunities that awaited. Humanity had a role in the galaxy, not because of weapons or dominance, but because of adaptability, creativity, and the capacity to connect across differences. Sira joined him without a word, standing silently beside him. Alden felt the subtle warmth in her presence, the recognition of his contributions, and perhaps the acknowledgement of a bond that transcended duty. He realized that the Ziran captain, for all her discipline and authority, was learning from him as much as he was learning from her. "You will remain aboard," she said finally, her voice low but firm. "Your presence has value." "I do not yet understand all of it, but it is undeniable." Alden nodded. "I am honored, Captain. I will continue to observe, learn, and assist as I can." She inclined her head slightly, and for a fleeting moment her expression softened into something almost human. Alden recognized the gesture, not authority, not command, but acknowledgement. The faint glow of her blush lingered, subtle and unspoken, a reminder of the connection that had begun with a single compliment and had grown through action, insight, and trust. The galaxy beyond the viewport was vast, full of unknowns, challenges, and dangers. But Alden understood that together, humans and Zirans could face it more effectively. Adaptation, creativity, and courage, qualities that had defined humanity for millennia, could complement the Ziran discipline, skill, and loyalty. As he turned to leave the observation deck, Alden felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle had proven one thing clearly: humanity was not weak nor insignificant. And perhaps more importantly, connections could be forged across species, across cultures, and across the void of space, through observation, understanding, and sometimes the simplest acts of respect. And somewhere nearby, Captain Sira considered him again, aware of the subtle shift that had occurred. She reflected on the courage, insight, and adaptability of this human, and understood that their shared experience had altered the perception of humanity aboard her ship, and perhaps, in time, across the galaxy. The Xiran flagship moved steadily through the dark expanse of space, the distant stars streaking past like shards of light. Alden walked along the corridors, feeling more confident in his place aboard the ship than ever before. He had observed, advised, and even influenced the outcome of a major battle. The crew now regarded him with cautious respect, and Captain Sira's acknowledgement of his contributions had shifted the balance of his relationship with her from mere guest to valued participant. A soft chime summoned him to the strategy chamber. When he arrived, Sira was already there, studying a new holographic display of star systems. The display showed a cluster of territories, some controlled by Xirans, others uncharted or contested by unknown factions. Alden could see the complexity, the variables, the potential for conflict, but also opportunity. "Your insights have proven useful," Sira said without turning. "I want you to continue. Humanity's perspective may reveal strategies we cannot foresee." Alden nodded, taking his place beside her. "I'll do my best, Captain. I can only offer what I see and what I understand." She inclined her head slightly, her gaze shifting to him briefly. "Your best has been effective. Today we test not only strategy but trust." He felt a ripple of anticipation. Trust. That word had come quietly but with weight. The compliment he had given her days ago had begun a chain of events, and now it seemed that chain would lead to something far larger. Their next mission came swiftly. Intelligence reports indicated a vulnerable alien convoy passing near Xiran-controlled space. It was an opportunity, rare, precise, and dangerous. Sira called a meeting with the fleet commanders, Alden included. He observed their deliberations, noting both the strength of their calculations and the rigidity that sometimes limited creativity. When the discussion reached a stalemate, conflicting opinions about risk versus reward, Alden spoke. "Captain, if I may," he began, careful with his tone. "The convoy's path is predictable. Your fleet could create a controlled blockade while a smaller squadron intercepts the lead vessels. A direct confrontation is risky, but if we combine precision with a flexible approach, we can secure the convoy without unnecessary loss." Sira looked at him, her expression unreadable, then slowly nodded. "Proceed with your recommendation." "Human, you will lead the advisory squadron." Alden's chest tightened. Lead the squadron? This was more than observation. This was responsibility on a scale he had never imagined. He swallowed his nerves and followed the protocols, ensuring every instruction was clear and every suggestion precise. The crew listened, adapting quickly. He realized that humans' ability to communicate under pressure, to adapt in real time, was a strength the Xirans respected more than he had first thought. The operation began. Alden coordinated closely with the squadron, issuing directives and monitoring the holographic displays. The convoy moved predictably, as expected, but when the lead vessels approached the blockade, Alden's squadron executed a rapid maneuver, intercepting them before they could change course. Xiran ships followed the plan flawlessly, and the convoy was secured with minimal resistance. Sira observed silently from the command deck, her expression softening slightly as she watched Alden manage the operation. When the final vessels were secured, she turned to him. "You have demonstrated more than observation or insight. You have leadership. Humanity may possess qualities we have underestimated." Alden felt a rush of pride. "I only acted as I could, Captain. I observed, learned, and acted. That is all any human can do." Her gaze held his for a moment, lingering with subtle warmth. He noticed the faint blush that had appeared days ago, recurring now in quiet acknowledgement rather than surprise. She was human in that moment, recognizing effort, respect, and courage, qualities she valued even in an alien species. The rest of the cycle passed in careful monitoring and adjustments. Alden assisted with post-operation evaluations, noting patterns in Xiran decision-making, identifying strengths and minor vulnerabilities, and offering suggestions for improvement. Each input was met with respect, a reflection of the bond that had grown between him and Sira. He realized that the compliment, simple and human, had sparked not only a connection with her, but had also shaped how humanity was perceived aboard this flagship. That evening, Alden returned to the observation deck. Stars stretched infinitely beyond the viewport, silent witnesses to the events of the day. Sira joined him without a word. The two stood side by side, observing the vastness of space, sharing a quiet understanding that needed no words. "You have changed things," Sira said softly. "Not through power, not through force, but through presence. Observation, insight, courage. These are human strengths, and they have altered the course of our mission." Alden smiled faintly. "I think humanity survives by connecting, by observing, and by adapting. We can only do so much alone, but together we can do more." Sira's eyes lingered on him, reflecting the faint shimmer of her iridescent skin and the warmth beneath it. "Together, perhaps this is the way forward, not merely humans or Zirans, but combined. Trust and understanding." The acknowledgement felt profound. Alden understood that he had earned more than trust. He had earned a role, a bridge between species. He was no longer a guest or a prisoner. He was an advisor, a participant, a symbol of what humanity could achieve when intellect, courage, and insight were applied with honesty and respect. In the following days, Alden continued to observe, advise, and participate. He attended fleet drills, studied Ziran technology, and engaged with the crew, learning their rituals, their discipline, and the subtle cues that guided their behavior. He noticed that Sira consulted him more frequently, seeking his perspective on issues beyond strategy, ethical questions, resource allocation, and even morale. Their bond deepened, professional and personal, without words fully capturing it. Then came a moment that would define their relationship. A distress signal from a nearby human colony reached the flagship. They were under attack by an unknown faction, poorly equipped to defend themselves. Alden immediately understood the stakes. Lives were at risk, and his role had evolved beyond observation and advice. He briefed Sira on the situation, outlining the threats and proposing a coordinated response. The captain listened intently, her usual composure unbroken, yet her eyes reflected the faint warmth of trust and understanding. "You will lead the response plan," she said firmly. Alden coordinated a rapid deployment, using both Ziran efficiency and human adaptability. The fleet moved as one, guided by his insights. He suggested maneuvers that combined discipline and flexibility, exploiting the attackers' predictable patterns. The operation succeeded flawlessly. The colony was secured, casualties minimized, and Alden's strategic input proved decisive. When the operation concluded, Sira approached him on the command deck. The faint blush returned, subtle but present, as if acknowledging not only his skill but also his courage and humanity. "You have earned your place," she said quietly. "Not as a guest, not as a prisoner, but as a valued member of this mission. Your people, your species, have shown worth beyond what I expected." Alden felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come aboard a Ziran flagship as an envoy, a diplomat constrained by protocol. Through observation, insight, and action, he had proven humanity's value. But more than that, he had forged a connection, trust, respect, and understanding with one of the galaxy's most disciplined species and their formidable captain. He stood beside Sira on the observation deck as the stars stretched endlessly before them. The galaxy was vast, full of unknown challenges, yet he felt hope. Humanity had a place here, not through force or dominance, but through intelligence, courage, and the capacity to connect across differences. Sira looked at him, her expression softer than usual, eyes reflecting both stars and the subtle warmth of her acknowledgement. "You have changed how we see humans," she said, "and perhaps how we see ourselves." Alden smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "We all adapt. We all learn. Together we can accomplish far more than alone." The Ziran captain inclined her head, a gesture of respect and trust. Alden knew that this was more than protocol. It was recognition of humanity's potential and his role as a bridge between worlds. The flagship moved onward, carrying its crew and their human ally through the endless darkness of space. Alden knew challenges would continue, dangers awaited, and conflicts would arise. But he also knew that connection, trust, and understanding were as powerful as any weapon. Humanity had proven its worth, and the galaxy had begun to see them not just as observers but as participants, capable, courageous, and adaptable. As he gazed at the stars, Alden reflected on the journey that had begun with a simple compliment. One human word, given honestly and without expectation, had altered his life, the perception of his species, and the dynamics aboard a Ziran flagship. It had led to trust, respect, and partnership. And it had shown that even across species, even across galaxies, the simplest human gestures could have the most profound consequences. Alden realized that the story was far from over. New challenges awaited, new opportunities to prove humanity's worth, and new ways to strengthen the bond between humans and Xerans. Yet he felt ready, confident that observation, insight, and courage would guide him through whatever the stars might hold. And somewhere nearby, Captain Sira observed him with a quiet satisfaction. She reflected on the human before her, the one who had dared to speak freely, to observe carefully, and to act decisively. She understood now that humanity was not to be underestimated. They had shown adaptability, courage, and the power of connection. And she knew that together, human and Xeran, they could face the vast unknown of the galaxy with strength and understanding. The stars stretched endlessly, full of promise and challenge. Alden stood ready, a human among aliens, a bridge between species, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve. The galaxy was vast, but he no longer felt small. He felt capable, respected, and connected. Humanity had arrived, not through conquest or force, but through courage, insight, and understanding. And the future stretched before him, bright and full of possibility.